Well, hello, fans. Sid Thompson here. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, wherever you're watching it from. Between periods here tonight for the hockey game. We got a guest tonight. Let me give you the background on this gentleman. I'm going to bring it up here. I'm pleased to have this gentleman on today. Back in June of this past year, 2024, the Minnesota Wild announced it hired a vice president of the Minnesota Wild Foundation and the community relations. It's a newly created position. And this gentleman was one of the original staff hired back in 1998. His job is to align and guide strategic direction of two entities and embody the Wild's mission to create a greater state of hockey. He also had, during his 12-year tenure as an executive director at College Hockey Inc., Mike implemented a bunch of strategic plans that resulted in several new hockey programs in NCAA schools across America. Part of that, Mike was also involved with, he's executive director of Minnesota Hockey, receiving the 2013 Minnesota Hockey President's Award. And he also accepted the 2019 Oscar Almquist Award for his contributions to successful high school hockey in Minnesota. He's a graduate of St. Thomas. He also serves on boards of USA Hockey Hall of Fame, Minneapolis Youth Hockey Association, as a coach to youth hockey and baseball for over the past 20 years. And prior to his 9-year stint in sales and sponsorship with the Wild, he'd worked with the North Stars and the Minnesota Moose hockey team. That's where I first met Mike, working on projects with the Moose and Minnesota Timberwolves, where I was in season tickets there myself. So I'd like to welcome in and bring in a good friend. I like to consider him a friend. It's been a while since we, chatted face to face. But Mike Snee, Mike, maybe seeing it here. And there you are, Mike.
Hey,
Pleasure to
Sid.
have you on, man. Glad to see you. It's been a while.
Enjoy the opportunity. Good to see you again.
It's been a while since we've last spoken. I want to talk a little bit of hockey and what you got going with the different programs, where you came from. So I hope I didn't miss anything in that. You have your long list. You have a laundry list of experiencers in the hockey world as an executive and getting involved. So quite
That's your
extensive
way of telling
background.
me that I'm old, Sid?
Oh, no. Well, I think that's just
Yeah.
our forehead here. So
Well,
I had to turn the light off, otherwise I would have been glaring after it. So it's two bald men together. We should be an interesting conversation. So that.
that's right.
But Mike, let's go back. I met you back in the day with the Moose. That was interesting when we had the North Stars went back and left, and we got the Moose in. You're in ticket sales there. You started there, and that was a good experience. And that was a fun experience. It wasn't pro, but it was minor league. A great experience there. And can you tell me about, when you started involved with sports and working with the North Stars in the Wild? I mean, how did it happen? I mean, how did that all happen? I kind of like to get that background before we jump into everything.
I was graduating from the University of St. Thomas in 1991 with a degree in economics. And compared to kids today, who many of them seem so well prepared when they're coming out of college, I was not. I pretty much started to try to address my future life needs after I graduated, not while I was in college. And so I was working some part-time jobs the summer of 91. I was pretty much going to every Twins baseball game that summer. It was a good summer if you were a Twins fan.
Oh, yeah.
And just living life, and naively decided to start calling the pro sports teams because I thought it'd be fun to work there. And I timed a call to the North Stars, truly just timed it well. They had some staff turnover, and a person had just started there from the Seattle Mariners, and he gave me an informational interview. And then at the end of it said, I'm looking to hire an intern, unpaid intern. I had no better alternatives. My job at that time was at night, so I thought I'll do this unpaid internship during the day, and started there the day after Labor Day, 1991. And it was a fortuitous moment for me, not well planned, but more just good fortune. And that internship lasted 9 months, and then that led to a full-time job at the Timberwolves, which led to a full-time job at the Moose. And then fortunate to be one of the first people hired by the Minnesota Wild in 1998, and then Minnesota Hockey, College Hockey Inc., and now back here at the Wild. So it really just started with a well-timed call to the North Stars almost 34 years ago.
Oh, kind of a whirlwind tour. There was one juncture though you actually had a job outside of sports, wasn't it, Mike?
Yep. Yeah, I worked at a place called Life Touch from 96 to 98, I believe it was. The Moose had left. You referenced the Moose. They were only here for 2 years. So we had an inaugural season and a final season, and nothing in between that. So they left, and then I ended up getting a job because it was offered to me and I needed a job, and I took it. and did that for 2 years. But then the Wild, in that period of time, the Wild were granted that expansion team, and I was able to get hired back into sports, and at this point, the Wild.
Sure. I only bring that up because I think because sports kind of is my passion, and it sounded like your story you talked about. You got back into the Wild. You told me a while back. It's like you weren't working a job again. Working with the Wild, working what you do, what you love, right? That's why I wanted to bring that little peanut. So you get into college hockey, Inc., and that's interesting because I know you were there for 12 years, and I wanted to bring it up because there's a lot of things going on with that. The expansion of hockey, you're involved with a lot of different hockey aspect there, and doing that. I mean, what can you tell me the experiences that brought to you? I mean, just helping expand hockey. I mean, during your tenure there was a bunch of different teams that came into hockey, like you see Augustana now, and Arizona State, Penn State. What is college hockey Inc.? I mean, where's the state of college hockey now versus when you were there just starting? I mean, it's really kind of crazy, isn't it? I mean, college hockey is at a peak right now, I would say.
I would say yes, I agree with that. However, I would also say when I started, college hockey was doing quite well then too. The challenge was, and we see this in Minnesota, is the perception that some people had of college hockey 15 years ago wasn't in line with the reality of it. So you fast forward 15 years, a lot hasn't really changed about college hockey because it was always great. What has changed is people's perception of college hockey. So College Hockey Inc. wasn't really like some change agent out there changing college hockey. They still play the same number of games. Their season is still the same length. Everything about college hockey in 2024 or 2025 is very similar to college hockey in 2012. But what's different is the story that's told about it. And I think that's where the opportunity in 2012 was to make sure that people were well aware of just how good college hockey is. And why it worked is because you didn't have to make the story up. It was real. You just had to reveal the story that was there all along. And I think the same thing to a lesser degree in Minnesota. I don't think Minnesota has any kind of a perception issue in hockey. I think what has the perception issue is people, for some reason in hockey, people think like you've got to be on a superstar all-star team and you can only play superstar all-star teams. And unless your schedule requires you traveling around the country, it's not real hockey. When in fact, our nice little community hockey in Minnesota has never performed as well as it's performing, especially relative to other places. So part of the role here at the Wild now, and in particular in my particular role, is to, I think, similar to a College Hockey Inc. It's not really change anything. Just make sure the story is told and that the perception of how successful it is equal to the reality of it. And that's, you don't have to fake the story. You don't have to make stuff up. You don't even have to change anything. You just have to pull the cover back and make sure people realize just how good community hockey in Minnesota is, similar to what it was like at College Hockey Inc.
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing, Mike, I want your opinion on and talk about, and I think a lot of people they think, well, my kid's D1, 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 but just to play college hockey, whether it be D3 or now with the advent of how big ACHA and AAU hockey is becoming, that's really good. They're nuts down in SEC and some of these, Pacific Northwest, some of those schools out there, they're crazy. Go bonkers for their club hockey, which has really gotten to be good. It's not D1, but yet it's good club hockey. It's good hockey. So can you talk a little about that? And maybe in the past it's always gotten a bad name, or it's club hockey. It's just a bunch of guys that they drive to the games, this and that, but it's not like that anymore. So what are your thoughts? Can you give me some feedback and thoughts on that in reference to what you think about college
personally
hockey?
The realization of how good hockey ACHA, I know some people involved don't like the word club. They might prefer non-varsity or some different word, but for the sake of simpleness, I'll just call it club. There's a lot of club hockey teams, and some are what you just referenced, which is less formal, and that serves its niche, that serves its role. But some of the club hockey is, like you said, spectacular, not only on the ice, but how it's paid attention to off the ice. And I'm a Minnesotan, so I live in Minnesota, where Division III hockey is strong, NCAA Division III, just like it is in New England. So I sense that when you live either in the Minnesota area or in New England, your exposure to the next level of hockey after Division I is high caliber Division III hockey. But elsewhere in the country where Division III hockey doesn't have a presence, big time club hockey fills that role. And as you referenced, some of those crowds are pretty big, which I didn't know. But also a unique thing about club hockey is you can go to a major Division I Power 5 type school, have that experience of a big university, football games on Saturdays in the fall, yet play a very competitive level of hockey. One program I got familiar with was at the University of Georgia, and their coach and their coaching staff, their facility, the crowds they draw, and playing the schools that they play, it's a super cool experience. I'm not saying, better or worse than Division III, but for somebody that perhaps wants that type of school for their schooling, they want that big Power 5 school. Just know that if you don't realize it, you might have the opportunity to go get that type of schooling and play hockey there if you're not at the caliber to play Division I hockey at a Minnesota or a Wisconsin or Michigan. You can still have that type of school experience and a pretty high caliber hockey experience too.
Sure. No, agreed. And I think it's just continuing to grow. I foresee, maybe I'm wrong, but the changing of the landscape in the next 5 to 10 years, we may see some teams that eventually are Division I. And with how big football is in that SEC, Mike, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some of those SEC schools maybe eventually go there. When you mentioned Georgia, one thing that I wanted to ask you about too, because having been involved with it until you jumped over to the Wild here, was with this advent of the CHL now opening up and that ruling. How do you think that's going to affect college hockey? To me, and it's just my opinion. To me, it should have been done anyway because we have NIL going on right now with all the other sports. So what's the difference? I mean, players getting paid up there. It's just in the norm, I just think. So what are your thoughts on that whole thing? How that's going to affect the landscape?
Do we have about 85 minutes?
Well, give me the old cliff notes on this one.
There's a lot to it. That's a loaded question. I would just say hockey now is more like the other sports. I mean, none of the other sports just kind of arbitrarily said you 2017, 18, and 19-year-olds are ineligible and these other ones are eligible. I understand why they were ineligible to begin with back in the 1970s. But then over time, college hockey clearly embraced junior hockey and the junior hockey player to the degree that it was almost required that you go and spend a couple of years playing junior hockey after you graduate from high school. Okay. Where that was not what was happening when they made CHL players ineligible 50 plus years ago. So I'd say it's hard to defend them not being eligible. Wherever you lie on it, on the topic of CHL eligibility, it got to a point where it was just challenging to defend it because you would have one kid playing junior hockey, playing 70 games, going to school online, living in a billet's home, tons of travel, fighting, half shield, whatever. Okay. And then you'd have another junior hockey player. They both were living very similar lives, but because I would say they were living identical lives, but because this player was in this junior league and this player was in that junior league, one had full eligibility and the other did not. It's just, again, you don't have to like it, but it would be hard to defend it. Just like you don't have to like that big time college football quarterbacks getting $5 million, but it's hard to defend that they shouldn't be able to get $5 million. And I'm not even suggesting it's going to make, like in the football case, it might not make college football more popular. It might make it less popular. That's okay. But it's hard to defend here in the United States of America, denying somebody the opportunity to make money if they can make money. And that's, that's I don't know if the answer you're looking for, but basically what I'm saying now is that almost everybody, as long as they're academically eligible, is going to be eligible to play college hockey. And it probably means that the caliber of play in NCAA Division I hockey is going to increase. It also means that if this is an interesting topic to someone, that the sport will become more international meaning more Canadians and more Europeans, because the vast majority of the players that weren't eligible were non-American players. To some, that's just a fact, just a note. And to others, that's disappointing. And I understand both sides. And so I'm just more or less making a statement there of what's likely to happen, not making an editorial statement.
Sure. No, well, that's what I was just wanting your thoughts on. So, I mean, I appreciate that and feedback. So very good comments. And, quite honestly, when you look at I had buddies that played major junior back in the day, and, what they got for stipends, it's nothing. So, I mean, it was next to nothing compared to what these kids get paid now in NIL money. So, but let's move on.
Even in full cost of attendance, which started, I don't know exactly when it started, 8-10 years ago. The amount that Division I scholarship athletes get as a full cost of attendance stipend alone is frequently as much, if not more, than a CHL player was getting.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to it because I think it's going to be, like you said, really improve hockey. College hockey is great, but it's going to only increase the level, I think, in my opinion as well. So it's
I will say this though, like if you want to stick with the topic, and I think this is an issue that hockey has in general. Hockey has embraced a very narrow pyramid style of development. Absolutely the opposite of football. Football has embraced a spread the players out model of development. This will narrow the pyramid because right now you have 64 men's Division I programs and roughly 60 CHL programs, and the rosters are pretty exclusive of each other. You weren't having many players do both. The only players you'd have that would do both would be somebody that might start at college and then leave and go to the CHL. So that was 120 approximate rosters of different players. Now you're going to see a lot of those CHL rosters feeding college players. So it could narrow the pyramid and diminish the number of opportunities for players. But one way to look at it.
Yeah, that's a different perspective. So I want to jump on now. Then we talked about this a little bit because I want to get your thoughts on from college hockey perspective. But then now moving on, leaving after 12 years, this position here at the Minnesota Wild, this foundation. So can you give me a little bit of background? I mean, obviously jumping back to the team you worked in for them before. So this position that they started, tell me a little bit more about it. I mean, I'm not familiar with it. I was trying to delve in a little bit, the foundation, the community relations. I know it's trying to make hockey greater and, hockey's for everyone and sort of thing. Can you expand on for the watching community between periods here and people that are watching this? What exactly the foundation, what's your, position, what it's entailing?
So the Wild have always had a strong foundation run by Rachel Schult. Do a great job raising money through various initiatives, a lot of events, auctions, some gambling opportunities when you come to games to play the split the pot raffle. So we've got one of the better performing foundations that's been around for over a decade that Rachel Schult oversees. And generally either raise or are the reason for about $1.5 to $2 million per year being raised, and then most of that being reinvested back into the community. And then we've also, and I can say this even back to when I was at the Wild have been spectacular in terms of supporting grassroots hockey, youth hockey, growing the game of hockey in the state of Minnesota. Wayne Peterson in particular heads up what we call our hockey partnerships and community relations, and they've done a lot of good things there. So no change to that. No need to change because both perform so well. But what I would say my role and what will be new and what we announced this past weekend is an initiative called Skate It Forward. So I give the Wild leadership from owner Craig Leopold, CEO Matt Maka, and others a lot of credit for what they've done up to this point for the 25-year existence of the team to support hockey in Minnesota, but also for understanding and realizing and caring that hockey in Minnesota is delivered in a community way. You play for your community youth association, you play for your high school, and you do that in a community-owned rink, which may not seem newsworthy, especially if you're a lifelong Minnesotan. But that's not how the rest of the country, how kids and families experience hockey in the rest of the country. North Dakota, they do it that way. Wisconsin, they do it that way. There might be small pockets here and there. But for the most part, in the rest of the country, you're playing for a club-type team, not connected to a community. not with any type of boundaries about where the players need to be from. And then you're playing for either like a junior team or an academy team, a club team, something like that. And then you're frequently doing it in a rank that's not a community rank. So it's, again, I don't want to make an editorial comment, but it certainly leads to much higher cost to play the sport and much more time commitment. And what I would call, like, there's good time commitment and negative time commitment. Good time commitment is time on the ice, time in the weight room, that type of thing. Negative time commitment is time on the road, time in a plane, time in an airport, time in a hotel. It leads to more negative time commitment. And all of those factors lead to just less cultural meaningfulness of the sport. Okay. You're not playing for a community. You play a lot of your games not anywhere near your hometown. The sport becomes more niche than mainstream, and so on. And I feel like I'm kind of going pretty deep here, but the Wild acknowledge that. They realize what we have in Minnesota special. They also realize that what is in Minnesota is a little bit at risk, because there are people that want to make a lot of money off of youth hockey. And there's the potential to do that in Minnesota, but you don't make that money in a community hockey environment. So the desire to make money means the desire to move away from community hockey. And I think the Wild, again, I can't compliment them enough for not only realizing this, but taking action. Understand that if that were to happen in Minnesota, that would, one, just in general, that wouldn't be good. But two, it would also affect the Wild. It would negatively affect the Wild. The whole notion of being the state of hockey would be less true if we weren't so excited about watching Warroad play Roseau, or Blaine play Centennial, or name the rivalry, okay, which exists throughout the state. So I would say the primary objective of my role is to work within the community hockey model to preserve it and strengthen it. And the best time to do that is when you're already healthy. And community hockey in Minnesota as a whole has never been better. It's going quite well, but let's not take it for granted. And let's not wait for it to move backwards before we try to continue to move it forward. Let's get at it while it's in good shape, and make it even better shape. And we'll accomplish that by raising money, philanthropic money, from other people in the state that get that feel that same way, that want to participate, and then reinvest it. Because community hockey is only going to work if all or most of the communities are high performing, and most of them are right now. And so our desire long term is to work with the people that are making that happen, to allow those people to make it happen even more.
Oh, and I think it's all about, when you talk about community, it's a culture. You mentioned, like, those communities. I'm from Roseau. You mentioned Warroad. That's a culture there where they believe strongly in their community and want that community hockey to be successful. And when they're down, it's, they're frustrated because they want to win. But I want to spin off that. When you mentioned this community hockey, the AAA aspect, is that something that, and that, I guess I want to go down the rabbit hole, but I want to bring it up, that may be ruining some of this we're talking about, because you got AAA of this, AAA of that. They're all over, and that's kind of taking kids from the community to play AAA, and they're going all over God's creation. What is that kind of against what we're talking about here, Mike?
I really hesitate from pointing to anything and saying that's bad or that's wrong, or.
Well, yeah, I don't mean that. I'm not trying to.
So I want to be clear. If you live in a different city and you're an aspirational competitive hockey player, that's your option. Doesn't make you a bad person for doing it. Doesn't mean that it's not important to you. Doesn't mean that it's not meaningful to you. So I won't say that. But I guess I have personally taken to this analogy a few months ago, and it seems to work. Okay. The way a kid plays hockey in Minnesota is the way a kid plays football in the entire country. Right?
Good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're growing up in White Bear Lake and you're a hockey player, when you're 12, you're playing for the White Bear Youth Hockey Association. When you're 17, you're playing for White Bear Lake High School or Hill Murray. Gotta get that jab in there, okay? And you're doing it at the at the municipally owned rink in White Bear or in Forest Lake, if you're from Forest Lake, or in Albert Lee or from Cloquet, whatever it is. Okay, you're doing the same thing, right? If you're a football player, if you're an aspirational football player growing up in Minnesota or anywhere else in the country, that's how you're playing football, right? I did a cursory look at NFL rosters a few months ago, and as best as I could tell with the resources I had, over 95% of NFL players played high school football, and the vast majority of them played high school football their senior year while living in their house, okay, including Justin Jefferson. Played public high school football in his mid-sized town in Louisiana, okay? For some reason in football, it's a widely accepted, nobody questions that. Nobody says the Minnesota football model. Nobody says the Colorado football model. But when it comes to hockey, it's kind of questioned. But it's questioned because the people creating those questions are people that own hockey. They might own a rink, they might own a youth program, they might own a junior team, whatever. And they want to plant seeds of doubt into families playing community hockey that, hey, you really think you're going to reach your full potential, that you're going to get to the NHL or to college hockey or whatever you're trying to achieve by playing cute little community hockey. When in fact, every single statistic not only suggests that you will reach your full potential playing community hockey, it proves without a doubt that it's better for you from a hockey development standpoint. Okay. So when you ask, like, hey, is AAA ruining it? I don't know, but I know that AAA recruits a lot and they recruit everywhere. Okay.
Yes.
Their territory isn't zip codes, it's time zones. And when it comes to recruiting a player in Minnesota, the tactic that, and I'm going to hesitate to say they all use because I'm not in all of the conversations, but the tactic that is most frequently used is to suggest that you're not a serious hockey player if you're playing for your community. You're not a serious hockey player if you're playing for your high school. If you really want to get noticed, if you really want to reach your full potential, you should come to this team and live with a billet and travel the country and miss a lot of school and pay a ton of money and not play in front of bands and classmates, but more importantly, not play in front of 6-year-olds from your community that you're going to inspire. Okay. And they don't tell you the reason why they want you to do that. The reason they want you to do that is because it's a business and your parents are a customer for me. Okay. So I hope that that's an understandable way of answering that question without being negative about the people that do that. All right.
No, I think
so. I hope that makes sense. But
no, it does. But the point that I take from that, and the point I really appreciate, is that you talk about the community, and I'll take, for instance, like, let's go back to where I'm from. For instance, Roseau. I know at one point we had Aaron Ness back there, was Mr. Hockey one year, phenomenal. He could have left, but he came back and played. And there's kids that do that, but others leave their senior year or their junior year to go play and don't stay in the community. And that's what I like to see. Community. And you talking about, yes, you can be that next level by sticking in the community. And that's what builds hockey in these communities. Like, I'm in Winona. We're in Winona right now. We're trying to build a culture here. We got one very good hockey player, went and played juniors prior and came back. And the kids look up to him. So that's what I like to see. He's coming back. He can play a little bit before and after, but not leave and don't come back. Because that's what I like, that point. That's the point to me that what community is about. And that's why the Wild and everything helping out communities too. With the different things. So that's one other thing too. In terms of this foundation and different things under the monies and stuff, Mike, how does a community, say XYZ community, maybe they're looking at, trying to build a new rink, or they want to get boards or something. Can they request through you, or how does that work through this community relations? How do they go about that?
The Minnesota Wild Foundation has long issued grants, like I referenced earlier, the amount of money that we raise through our events, and we also host a raffle at every home game, and there's a beneficiary for every raffle. And right now, we serve two different types of organizations: either nonprofit type hockey organizations, youth hockey programs, or initiatives and nonprofits that serve children's health needs. We have a big partnership with the Minnesota Children's Hospital and raise a lot of money for them, as well as some other wonderful organizations that serve children's health. So if you fit into one of those two categories, you can contact us. And then from a hockey standpoint, we work with Minnesota Hockey, the Girls High School Coaches Association, Boys High School Coaches Association, United Heroes League, Dynamites, Special Hockey, Sled Hockey, Wounded Warriors, all sorts of wonderful hockey organizations like that. Skated Forward is new, and Skated Forward will work specifically with the nonprofit community associations to help them, and they're all already doing a great job at this. So help them do something that they're great at, even a little greater. Okay. We say that around here a lot, a greater state of hockey. It's already a great state of hockey. What can we do to make it a greater state of hockey? Provide them with tools to get more 5 and 6 year olds to play hockey next year than there are this year. And if we want to have a vision to preserve and improve, preserve and strengthen community hockey in Minnesota, the number one thing to do is to make sure that our rinks remain municipally owned. And the number one way to make sure rinks are municipally owned is to grow participation in the sport. So fundamentally, we need to get even more, even though we have the most already and it's growing, we need to grow even more hockey players here in the state, because that will address any kind of challenges or threats that we have and allow us to become an even greater state of hockey and an even better version of the state of hockey. And so that we're dealing directly with associations on that. So in terms of an individual family contacting us or whatever, that's not how we're going to implement Skated Forward.
Okay. Well, it's good to know. So, well, I know I want to kind of keep it to about 30, right around the 30-minute mark here, but I guess I ask this to anybody, no matter if I'm talking to an athlete or, just an individual. Because you've been around the game quite a bit in terms of, from a coaching standpoint, played a little bit and, now involved with this community stuff. If there's anybody that came to you and said you had a parent now or just a young player and said, Mike, Mr. Snee, can you give me any advice? What would you give me, as far as advice if I was a young athlete wanting to start playing the game or maybe expanding the game, just in general? I like to ask everybody that I talk to, Mike, in any interview I do. Can you give me your thoughts on that, your feedback? I'd love to hear what you think on that. What would you say to someone?
Oh, I'd say for sure play the game, because it's a wonderful game. I love other sports, especially baseball. But hockey is such a lifetime game. There's also aspects to hockey that I love. For example, on a youth team, the kid that's least skilled is likely to play almost as much, if not exactly as much, as the kid that's most skilled, just because of line changes and the length of shifts. And so I love that aspect of it. There's also not really plays, so to speak. So the puck's going to come to everybody. Other sports, there's plays. The ball might not come to you. Other sports, there's certain positions where the ball doesn't get hit nearly as much as other positions, and you might end up in one of those positions. Okay. Hockey is just a sport where you're going to play. You're going to have a lot of fun. And it takes everybody to influence a game. So I have found now, as you said right at the start of the call, I'm old. I have found in my many years that, as I think about it, just playing hockey is fun for a lot of reasons, and that's one of them. So I would say play. That's the first thing I'd say. And then the second one, because hockey is so privatized and so for profit, an outcome of that is that it's taking on a large identity of it's all about getting to the next level. It's not really about winning with my teammates. It's about getting on the right team where I'm going to be seen by the right people so that I can get to the next level. And that just seems like a dog chasing a tail. It's like when you're 14, you're playing to get to the next level. Well, okay, you get to the next level. You're 15. What are you playing for this year? I got to get to the next level. Well, it becomes this, I've always got to get to the next level. And the only time that's going to end, the only time you're going to stop chasing your tail is if you get to the NHL, because that's the only level where there's no level after it. And I say I even witnessed that in college hockey where, I think back to this, I'm not going to reference names, but these guys that were on this team at Michigan back in the 90s. And a number of them went on to great NHL careers. And I got to know a few of them, and you talk to them, and just like how meaningful it was to win at that national championship at Michigan. and how they came back to do it, and that it wasn't that they weren't less aspirational to be great NHL players. It was just that meant something to them, and accomplishing that together with that set of teammates meant something to them. And that feeling has just eroded because we've pounded into these kids and their parents that when they're playing hockey as 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds, their goal is to get to the next level. Their goal is to find a coach that's going to play them. Their goal is to be seen by the right people. And you just don't hear about, how about just be part of this team and win and work towards your goal this year of winning a championship. And I have to say that is something that I really do enjoy about the community hockey in Minnesota, even though I think it's eroded in Minnesota compared to 1982. But there's a lot more of it in Minnesota than there is elsewhere, even though it has eroded in Minnesota. And that's about just play for this year. Play with your teammates this year. It's about what's on the front of your jersey, not what's on the back of your jersey. And I try to say something like that. I know that makes me sound as old as I am, makes me sound like an old person.
No.
But if you start to look at the hockey marketing that's everywhere out there, what people are selling isn't be part of a great team, be part of championships. It's we're going to get you to the next level. You're going to be seen. This is only about development of you. And I think that's detrimental to the sport as a whole, because if all your goal is to get to the next level, you're not going to be happy unless you get to the NHL, because that's the only level that doesn't have a next level.
Mike, I think that is one of the most excellent points I've heard, because, to me, what it means, what I take from that is that, to live in the moment, be more mindful of where you're at instead of trying to always think ahead, because, be in the present. And I have some of my most, I didn't play in its championship team. I never made the state title and all that, but I have some great experiences having played in that community where I came from, and will never, I don't regret one bit, never leaving the community. I love it. And being able to have the friends in that and just playing the game for the love of the game. And if it takes it a championship, great. But being able to have those teammates and those memories that you have for a lifetime. And that's what I love about the game of hockey. And when I talk to guys like you, we have memories, playing in parade, playing goalie against you, and no check or something. I mean, that's what hockey's about. It's the camaraderie. So I really, really appreciate taking a few minutes here to chat with me about, what you're doing and, those last points you made. I think those are going to stick home in my mind. And hopefully those that are watching this will remember that as well, because it's very important. Yeah. Any last tidbits you want to say before we part ways today, Mike? Or
I always appreciate the opportunity to talk about these subjects. I think it's important. Hockey is there's a lot of even in its least expensive form. There's a lot of barriers to hockey. It's not running based. You're not doing it on a field or in a gym. Tons of equipment, and that's all required, and none of that's going to go away. I think it's important to be very mindful of hockey if you love hockey because of those aspects, and don't place any unnecessary or unneeded barriers on top of the necessary barriers, and to make sure that our sport remains mainstream and not niche. So any opportunity that I'll have to share those thoughts, I'll do it. So I appreciate the opportunity to do just that.
No, awesome. I thank you again for coming on with me here. I'm going to put this on between periods tonight and then the other game, and then I may throw it up on my Facebook page if that's okay with you, so others can watch the whole thing and instead of getting it up between periods. But I want to thank you again, Mike Snee. That was Mike Snee, the VP of Minnesota Wild Foundation and Community Relations here. Thanks a lot, Mike.
Thank you, Sid. Have a great day.
Good. You bet.